My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm 28 years old. What started as a simple jewelry shopping trip turned into the moment that exposed 28 years of family lies and set in motion a chain of events that would destroy my sister's perfect life forever. The slap echoed through Tiffany Company, but it was nothing compared to the sound of my world shattering when I discovered the truth about my real identity, and the billionaire husband who would soon become my unlikely protector in a war I never saw coming. Before we dive into this wild story, I need to ask, what do you think happens when someone who's been living a lie their entire life finally discovers the truth? Drop your predictions in the comments below. And if you love family drama with satisfying endings, hit that like button and subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next when everything I thought I knew about my family gets turned upside down. Growing up, the dynamic in our house was crystal clear. My sister Victoria was the golden child, 3 years older, prettier according to everyone, and somehow always destined for greatness. I was the afterthought, the accident baby who came along when my parents thought they were done having children. At least, that's what I was told my entire life. Victoria had always been the star. Homecoming queen, valedictorian, full scholarship to Northwestern. She married her college sweetheart, David Chen, who came from old money and now ran a successful hedge fund. They lived in a penthouse in downtown Chicago, drove matching Tesla Model S cars, and vacationed in the Maldives twice a year. Meanwhile, I was a social worker making $42,000 a year, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Logan Square, and driving a 2018 Honda Civic that I was still paying off. But here's the thing about being the afterthought, you learn to observe. You notice things that others miss because you're always on the outside looking in. And what I'd been observing lately was that Victoria's perfect marriage wasn't so perfect after all. It started 3 months ago at our cousin Maria's wedding. I caught David checking his phone constantly during the ceremony, typing messages with a secretive smile that I'd never seen him give Victoria. When Victoria went to the bathroom during the reception, I watched him slip outside to take a phone call, speaking in hushed, intimate tones that definitely weren't business-related. Then there were the unexplained late nights. Victoria would call me, crying, saying David was working late again, but his hedge fund's website showed their offices closed at 6 p.m. sharp. The expensive gifts that suddenly appeared, a Cartier watch, a new designer handbag, always accompanied by some elaborate story about a work bonus or successful trade. Victoria confided in me because, despite everything, I was still her little sister. She told me about finding unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, credit card charges to restaurants they'd never been to together, and how their intimate life had become practically non-existent. She was drowning in suspicion but too proud to admit that her perfect life might be crumbling. "Elena, am I being paranoid?" she'd ask during our weekly phone calls. "David says I'm imagining things, but something feels off. He's different. Distant. Like he's living a whole other life I'm not part of." I wanted to tell her what I'd observed, but family loyalty held me back. Blood is thicker than water, right? That's what our mother always said. Family protects family, no matter what. So I kept my mouth shut and watched my sister's marriage disintegrate while she remained in denial. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the family failure, watching the golden child's life fall apart, and I was the only one who could see it clearly. But Victoria had spent our entire lives making sure I knew my place, second best, second choice, second everything. Why should I be the one to deliver the devastating news that would shatter her carefully constructed world? Our parents, Roberto and Carmen Martinez, had always made it clear where their priorities lay. Victoria got the private violin lessons while I got group piano at the local community center. Victoria got name-brand clothes while I got thrift store finds. Victoria got help with her college tuition while I took out student loans that I'm still paying off at 28. Victoria has such potential, Mom would say. We have to invest in her future. As for me? Elena is strong. She'll figure it out. She always does. And I did figure it out. I worked 3 jobs through college, graduated debt-free through scholarships and grit, and built a career helping families in crisis. I might not have Victoria's penthouse or designer wardrobe, but I had something she didn't, the ability to see through people's facades and understand when something was fundamentally wrong. Which brings us to last Tuesday, when Victoria called me sobbing. David had missed their anniversary dinner, claiming a last-minute client emergency. She'd gone to the restaurant alone, embarrassed and heartbroken, only to see on his location sharing that he was at a different restaurant across town. "I can't do this anymore, Elena," she cried. "I think he's having an affair, but I need proof. I need to know for sure before I confront him. Will you help me?" Finally, she was ready to hear the truth. But I had no idea that helping my sister uncover her husband's betrayal would lead to uncovering an even bigger betrayal. One that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about my own identity and set us on a collision course that would end with that fateful slap at Tiffany Co. The next morning, Victoria picked me up in her gleaming white Tesla, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing yoga pants and an old Northwestern sweatshirt, practically pajamas by her standards. "I've been thinking about this all night," she said as we drove toward David's office building. "I need concrete evidence. Photos, text messages, something undeniable. I can't keep living in this uncertainty." We parked across from Chin Financial Group, a gleaming 40-story tower in the Loop. The plan was simple: follow David, document his activities, and hopefully catch him in the act. Victoria had taken the day off work, claiming a family emergency, which wasn't entirely untrue. At 11:30 a.m., David emerged from the building, but instead of getting in his Tesla, he walked to a nearby parking garage. We followed at a distance and watched him get into a silver BMW that definitely wasn't his car. Victoria's face went pale. "Whose car is that?" she whispered. We tailed the BMW through downtown Chicago, staying far enough back to avoid detection. David drove to the Peninsula Hotel, one of the most expensive hotels in the city. He parked in the valet area and walked inside with the confidence of someone who'd been there many times before. Victoria was shaking as we sat in her car, watching the hotel entrance. "He's meeting someone. Oh God, Elena, he's really doing this. He's really cheating on me." 20 minutes later, a stunning brunette in a red coat emerged from a taxi and walked into the hotel. She was probably in her early 30s, tall and elegant with the kind of effortless grace that comes from money. Even from a distance, we could see she was gorgeous. "Do you recognize her?" I asked. Victoria stared intently, then gasped. "That's Sofia Romano. She's married to Alessandro Romano, you know, the real estate developer who owns half of the North Shore." "Oh my God, Elena, David is having an affair with a married woman whose husband could destroy him financially if he found out." We waited for another hour, but neither David nor Sophia emerged. Finally, Victoria couldn't take it anymore. "I'm going in there," she announced. "Victoria, no. That's not smart. If you confront them now, I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to catch them together so he can't lie to me anymore." Against my better judgment, I followed my sister into the Peninsula Hotel. The lobby was all marble and gold, the kind of place where afternoon tea costs more than my weekly grocery budget. Victoria marched straight to the concierge desk. "Excuse me, I'm looking for my husband, David Chin. He's meeting with a client here. Could you tell me what room they're in?" The concierge looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't provide guest information." Victoria's face flushed red. "I'm his wife. There's been a family emergency." "I understand, but hotel policy." "You know what? Forget it. I'll find him myself." Victoria stormed toward the elevators, and I hurried after her. "Victoria, this is crazy. You can't just wander around a hotel looking for them. Watch me." We rode the elevator to the top floor, where the penthouse suites were located. Victoria walked down the hallway, pressing her ear to each door, looking for any sign of David and Sophia. It was mortifying. Then, from behind the door of Suite 2012, we heard David's unmistakable laugh. Victoria froze, her face crumpling with the reality of what we'd found. She raised her hand to knock, then stopped. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I thought I could, but I can't." We rode the elevator down in silence, both of us processing what we'd discovered. In the lobby, Victoria suddenly grabbed my arm. "There's something else, Elena. Something I haven't told you." Her voice was shaky, almost frightened. "Last week, I was going through David's home office, looking for our tax documents, and I found something strange. A manila envelope hidden in his desk drawer with your name on it." "My name? Why would David have anything with my name on it?" "I don't know, but it was thick, like it contained documents or photos. When I tried to open it, he came home early and caught me. He was furious, more angry than I've ever seen him. He locked it in his safe and told me to never go through his things again." A chill ran down my spine. Why would my brother-in-law have documents with my name on them? What possible connection could there be between David Chen and me, other than being married to my sister? "Victoria, we need to get into that safe." "I don't know the combination." "Then we figure it out. Because I have a feeling that whatever's in that envelope is connected to all of this. David's affair might not be the only secret he's keeping." As we drove back toward Victoria's penthouse, my mind was racing. David Chen had always been polite but distant with me. We'd never had a real conversation beyond pleasantries at family gatherings. What could he possibly have that involved me? That afternoon, while David was presumably still at the Peninsula Hotel with his mistress, Victoria, and I broke into his home office safe. It took us 2 hours of trying different combinations, birthdays, anniversaries, social security numbers, before Victoria finally tried their wedding date backwards, and the safe clicked open. Inside, along with important documents and some expensive jewelry, was the manila envelope with my name written in David's handwriting. Victoria's hands were trembling as she handed it to me. "You open it, Elena. I can't handle any more surprises today." I tore open the envelope, and what I found inside made the affair discovery seem like a minor inconvenience. Birth certificates, DNA test results, private investigator reports, and a letter that began with the words that would change my life forever. Elena Martinez is not Roberto and Carmen Martinez's biological daughter. The documents scattered across David's desk told a story I never could have imagined. According to the private investigator's report, which was dated 6 months ago, I was born Elena Romano, not Elena Martinez. My biological father wasn't Roberto Martinez, the hard-working construction foreman who raised me. It was Alessandro Romano, the billionaire real estate developer whose wife David was currently sleeping with. "This can't be real," Victoria whispered, reading over my shoulder. "This has to be some kind of mistake." But the DNA test results were clear. The report showed a 99.7% probability that Alessandro Romano was my biological father. There were hospital records from 28 years ago, showing that Carmen Martinez had worked as a cleaning lady at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where she'd met Alessandro Romano during one of his visits to the cardiac wing where his own father was being treated. The timeline was damning. Carmen had worked at the hospital for 6 months, during which time she'd had an affair with Alessandro Romano. When she discovered she was pregnant, she'd quit her job and convinced Roberto that the baby, me, was his premature child. Roberto, who'd been desperately wanting children after Victoria, never questioned the timing. According to the investigator's notes, Alessandro Romano had no idea I existed until recently. David had somehow discovered the truth and had been using it to his advantage, though the documents didn't specify how. Victoria was staring at the papers in shock. "Elena, do you understand what this means? You're not just my sister, you're Alessandro Romano's daughter. You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You're an heiress." The irony was staggering. My entire life, I'd been treated as the family disappointment, the accident baby who wasn't worth investing in. Meanwhile, my real father was one of the wealthiest men in Chicago, and I'd been living in a one-bedroom apartment, struggling to pay off student loans. But there was something else in the envelope that made my blood run cold, a blackmail letter that David had apparently never sent. It was addressed to Alessandro Romano and detailed exactly how David had discovered my identity and what he wanted in return for keeping quiet. "Your daughter Elena Martinez has been living in poverty while you've built an empire," the letter read. "I think you'd be very interested in meeting her, especially since my wife Victoria has no idea that her sister is actually worth more than she'll ever be. Let's discuss how we can all benefit from this situation." David was going to blackmail Alessandro Romano, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He was going to use me as leverage. Victoria grabbed the letter from my hands, reading it with growing horror. "He's been planning this for months. All those late nights, all those mysterious meetings, he wasn't just having an affair. He was building a case against Alessandro Romano using you as his weapon." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. David hadn't stumbled into an affair with Sofia Romano by accident. He'd seduced her deliberately, knowing she was Alessandro's wife, as part of some elaborate scheme to get closer to the Romano family fortune. And I was the key to his entire plan. "We have to tell Mom and Dad," Victoria said. "Tell them what? That their entire marriage is built on a lie? That I'm not really their daughter? That Mom had an affair 28 years ago with a billionaire?" I was spiraling, trying to process the magnitude of what we'd discovered. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, staring at the documents. "Elena, there's something else you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago." My stomach dropped. "What now?" "I've always known you weren't Dad's biological daughter. Mom told me when I was 16, made me promise never to say anything. She said it would destroy the family if Dad found out." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. "You've known for 12 years and never said anything?" "Mom made me swear on our grandmother's grave. She said Dad loved you like his own and that was all that mattered. She never told me who your real father was, just that it was someone from when she worked at the hospital." I stared at my sister, my half-sister, in disbelief. "So while I was growing up feeling like I didn't belong, like I was different from everyone else, you knew exactly why. And you said nothing." "I was protecting our family." "You were protecting your position as the golden child. If everyone had known I was Alessandro Romano's daughter, maybe things would have been different. Maybe I wouldn't have struggled through college, maybe I wouldn't have." "Elena, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about all those times I'd felt like an outsider in my own family, all those moments when I'd wondered why I was so different from Victoria, why I had dark hair and olive skin while she was blonde and fair like our parents. I'd attributed it to genetics, never imagining the truth was so much more complicated. The documents also revealed something else. Alessandro Romano had been looking for me. According to the private investigator's timeline, he'd hired his own team 6 months ago to find the daughter he'd never known existed. David had somehow intercepted that information and had been using it to position himself as a middleman in the eventual reunion. "We have to return these documents," Victoria said suddenly. "David can't know we found them." "Are you kidding me? After everything we just discovered, you want to put these back and pretend nothing happened?" "Elena, think about this rationally. David has been planning something involving you and Alessandro Romano for months. If he finds out we know, there's no telling what he might do. We need to be smart about this." But I was done being smart. I was done letting other people make decisions about my life without my knowledge. I was done being the afterthought in my own story. "I'm going to find Alessandro Romano," I announced. "I'm going to tell him the truth about David's plan and introduce myself to my real father." Victoria's eyes widened. "Elena, no. You can't just show up at his office and drop this bombshell. You need to think about the consequences." "The consequences?" "Victoria, I've been living with the consequences of everyone else's lies my entire life. It's time for the truth to come out." That's when Victoria said the words that would lead to our confrontation at Tiffany Co. "If you do this, you'll destroy everything. David's career, our marriage, our family." You'll ruin all of our lives just because you're jealous that I got the better life. The accusation hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. After everything we'd just discovered, after learning that I was the daughter of a billionaire who could have given me every advantage in life, Victoria still thought this was about jealousy. This isn't about jealousy, Victoria. This is about justice. This is about the truth finally coming to light. But as I stormed out of her penthouse that day, clutching copies of the documents that proved my real identity, I had no idea that my decision to confront Alessandro Romano would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the most dramatic confrontation of our lives, right in the middle of Tiffany Co, where Victoria's perfect world would finally come crashing down. The Romano Industries building was everything you'd expect from a billionaire's headquarters. 50 stories of gleaming steel and glass towering over Chicago's financial district. Standing in the marble lobby, clutching the manila envelope that contained my entire identity crisis, I felt like Alice about to tumble down the rabbit hole. I hadn't made an appointment. How do you call ahead and say, "Hi, I'm the secret daughter you never knew existed, and by the way, your wife is cheating on you with the man who's been blackmailing you using me as leverage"? Some conversations require the element of surprise. The security guard at the front desk looked skeptical when I asked to see Alessandro Romano without an appointment. Mr. Romano only sees people by appointment, and his schedule is booked solid for the next 3 months. Tell him Elena Martinez is here, and it's about his daughter. I slid a sealed envelope across the marble counter. Give him this note. If he doesn't want to see me after reading it, I'll leave quietly. The note was simple. I'm Elena Martinez, born Elena Romano 28 years ago. I have information about David Chin, your wife Sophia, and a blackmail scheme that involves us both. We need to talk. 20 minutes later, I was riding the elevator to the 50th floor, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone in the building could hear it. The elevator opened directly into Alessandro Romano's executive suite, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. Alessandro Romano was not what I'd expected. I'd seen photos of him in business magazines, the typical billionaire CEO headshots with perfect lighting and expensive suits. But in person, he looked tired, almost vulnerable. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that was graying at the temples and the same olive complexion I saw in the mirror every morning. His eyes were dark brown, exactly like mine. Elena. He said my name like he'd been practicing it for years. Please, sit down. The office was intimidating, leather furniture, awards covering the walls, and a desk the size of my entire living room. But Alessandro's demeanor was surprisingly gentle as he sat across from me, studying my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. You have your mother's nose, he said softly. But you definitely have Romano eyes. I should have known the moment I saw you. You've seen me before? 3 years ago, at your sister's wedding. I was there as a business associate of David's, though now I understand why he insisted I attend. He was already planning this, wasn't he? I opened the manila envelope and spread David's documents across Alessandro's coffee table. His face grew darker with each page he read, and by the time he reached David's unsent blackmail letter, his jaw was clenched with barely controlled anger. That bastard, he muttered. He's been orchestrating all of this from the beginning. The affair with Sophia, befriending me through business connections, positioning himself to extract maximum leverage from this situation. Mr. Romano. Call me Alessandro. Or. He paused, looking uncertain. I don't know what you should call me. I've missed 28 years of your life. I don't know if I have the right to ask you to call me anything at all. The vulnerability in his voice surprised me. This was supposed to be one of the most powerful men in Chicago, and he looked lost. You can start by telling me why you never knew about me, I said. According to these documents, my mother worked at Northwestern Memorial when you were visiting your father. Did you know she was pregnant when she left? Alessandro's face crumpled. Carmen never told me she was pregnant. We had a relationship, yes. It lasted about 4 months while my father was in cardiac ICU. My marriage was falling apart. Sophia and I had been trying to have children for 2 years with no success, and the stress was destroying us. Carmen was kind, intelligent, and she made me feel human again during the worst period of my life. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. When my father recovered and Carmen suddenly quit her job, I assumed she'd gotten back together with her husband. I never tried to contact her because I thought it was for the best. I was trying to save my marriage, and she deserved better than being the other woman. But you hired investigators to find me recently. 6 months ago, I overheard David on a phone call that didn't make sense. He was talking about Elena Martinez and Romano bloodline and something about insurance policy. It struck me as odd. Why would he know anything about the Romano family beyond his business dealings with me? So I hired a private investigator to look into it. Alessandro turned back to face me, and I could see the regret written all over his features. When I found out you existed, I was devastated. All these years, I'd been mourning the children Sophia and I couldn't have, while my daughter was growing up in poverty just across the city. I've been trying to figure out the right way to approach you, but David Chen has been manipulating this situation from behind the scenes. The weight of 28 years of missed opportunities settled between us. I thought about all the scholarships I'd fought for, all the nights I'd worked double shifts to pay for college, all the times I'd watched Victoria get everything handed to her while I struggled for scraps. My adoptive father, Roberto, he's a good man, I said. He raised me like I was his own. But growing up, I always felt different, like I didn't quite fit. Now I know why. Tell me about your life, Elena. Tell me everything. I want to know who you became without me. Hey everyone, I know this is getting intense, right? The father she never knew, the sister who kept secrets, the brother-in-law with the ultimate betrayal plan, and we're not even at the biggest twist yet. Before we continue with what happens when Elena decides to confront this whole mess head-on, I'm dying to know what you think Alessandro should do about David's blackmail scheme. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because this family drama is about to reach nuclear levels. For the next hour, I told Alessandro about my life. About growing up as the accident baby, about working my way through college, about becoming a social worker because I wanted to help families in crisis, probably because my own family had always felt broken to me. He listened with an intensity that was both flattering and overwhelming, asking questions about my education, my work, my dreams. You became exactly what I would have hoped for in a daughter, he said when I finished. Independent, compassionate, strong. Carmen and Roberto did an incredible job raising you, even if they couldn't provide you with all the advantages you deserved. What happens now? I asked. David doesn't know that I know about any of this. Victoria thinks I'm going to destroy everyone's life by revealing the truth. And somewhere in this mess, your wife is having an affair with the man who's been planning to blackmail you using me as leverage. Alessandro's expression hardened. Now we turn the tables on David Chen. He's been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, but he made one crucial mistake: he underestimated you. What do you mean? David's entire plan depends on controlling the flow of information. He planned to orchestrate our meeting, present himself as the helpful brother-in-law who discovered this incredible coincidence, and position himself as the middleman who deserves compensation for reuniting a father with his lost daughter. But you've ruined that plan by coming to me directly. Alessandro walked to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. I've been investigating David for months, ever since I suspected he knew about you. His hedge fund is on the verge of collapse. He's made several bad investments and has been covering his losses by borrowing against his personal assets. He's desperate for money, which explains why he's been planning to blackmail me. And the affair with Sophia? I think the affair started as part of his plan to get close to our family, but it's become genuine on both sides. Sophia has been unhappy in our marriage for years. We've grown apart since we couldn't have children. David probably saw that vulnerability and exploited it. The pieces were falling into place. David wasn't just a cheating husband, he was a desperate man who'd been orchestrating an elaborate scheme to extract money from Alessandro using me as his ace in the hole. But his plan required keeping everyone in the dark about their connections to each other. "What are you going to do about Sophia?" I asked. Alessandro's smile was grim. "I'm going to give David exactly what he wants, a meeting with both Romano women. But it's not going to go the way he planned." "Both Romano women?" "You and Sophia. Tomorrow, we're going shopping for an engagement ring." I stared at him in confusion. "I'm not engaged." "You will be by tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to introduce you to someone very special, and we're going to put on a show that will draw David out into the open. Are you ready to help me destroy the man who's been using you as a pawn in his game?" As I left Alessandro's office that evening, my head was spinning with the elaborate plan he'd outlined. In less than 24 hours, I would go from being Elena Martinez, struggling social worker, to Elena Romano, billionaire heiress with a fake fiancé and a role to play in the most dramatic confrontation of my life. I had no idea that the plan would culminate with my sister slapping me in the middle of Tiffany & Company, but looking back, it was probably the only way this story could have ended. Some family secrets are so explosive that they require a public detonation to finally clear the air. The next morning, I woke up in a guest room at Alessandro's Lakeshore Drive mansion, still trying to process the surreal turn my life had taken. 24 hours ago, I'd been Elena Martinez, social worker. Now I was Elena Romano, secret heiress, preparing to play a role in an elaborate scheme to expose my brother-in-law's blackmail plot. Alessandro had spent the previous evening explaining his plan in detail. We were going to Tiffany & Company on North Michigan Avenue, where I would be shopping for an engagement ring with my supposed fiancé, a man Alessandro described only as someone I trust completely who's agreed to help us. The goal, Alessandro had explained, is to flush David out into the open. He's been watching our family for months, waiting for the right moment to reveal your identity and position himself as the middleman. When he hears that Alessandro Romano's long-lost daughter is getting engaged, he won't be able to resist making his move. The plan was elaborate. Alessandro would make sure Victoria and David learned about my engagement through carefully placed social media posts and a strategically leaked story to a society blogger. David, thinking his blackmail scheme was about to become worthless once my identity was public knowledge, would panic and try to intercept us at Tiffany's to salvage his plan. What Alessandro didn't tell me was that my fake fiancé would be Marcus Romano, his nephew, and the heir to the Romano real estate empire. Marcus was 32, devastatingly handsome, and according to Alessandro, the only person in our family who knows about you and is genuinely excited to help. I met Marcus that morning over breakfast in Alessandro's dining room, a space that could have housed my entire apartment. He was tall like his uncle, with dark hair and green eyes, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. "So you're the famous Elena Romano," he said with a smile that made my stomach flutter inappropriately. "Uncle Alessandro has told me so much about you. All good things, I hope." "Well, he mentioned you're brave enough to take on David Chen, which automatically makes you my hero. That guy has been a thorn in our family's side for months." Marcus had his own reasons for wanting to see David destroyed. According to Alessandro, David had tried to poach several of Romano Industries' biggest clients by spreading rumors about the company's financial instability. The rumors were false, but they'd cost the Romano family several $1,000,000 in lost contracts. "So how does this work?" I asked as Marcus slipped a stunning 3-carat diamond ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, which seemed impossible until I remembered that Alessandro had access to all my personal information through his private investigators. "We go to Tiffany's, act like an adorable engaged couple, and wait for David to make his move," Marcus explained. Alessandro's people have already leaked the story to Chicago social scene blog. "Billionaire's secret daughter emerges, engagement to Romano heir announced." The post went live an hour ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Elena, call me immediately. There's a story online about you being Alessandro Romano's daughter and engaged to his nephew." What the hell is going on? "Phase 1 complete," I said, showing Marcus the text. "Victoria knows. Which means David knows, which means he's probably losing his mind right about now." His entire blackmail scheme just became public knowledge. We arrived at Tiffany Company at exactly 2 p.m. as planned. The store was busy with Saturday afternoon shoppers, but the moment we walked in, it was clear we were going to receive VIP treatment. The sales associate, a perfectly groomed woman named Patricia, immediately escorted us to a private viewing room. "Mr. Romano, Ms. Romano, congratulations on your engagement. We're so excited to help you find the perfect wedding rings." Marcus squeezed my hand as we sat down at the elegant table where Patricia began displaying various wedding band options. "We're thinking something classic but unique," he told her. "Elena has very specific taste." I had to admit, Marcus was good at this. His hand in mine felt natural, and the way he looked at me made it easy to believe we were genuinely in love. For a moment, I almost forgot this was all an elaborate performance. That's when I saw David Chen walk into the store. He looked frantic, scanning the showroom until he spotted us through the glass partition of our private room. His face was flushed, and even from a distance, I could see the desperation in his eyes. This was a man whose carefully constructed plan had just collapsed, and he was scrambling to salvage whatever he could. David spoke briefly with a sales associate, then began walking toward our room. Marcus squeezed my hand tighter. "Here we go," he murmured. But David didn't come alone. Behind him, looking confused and angry, was Victoria. My sister looked like she'd been crying. Her usually perfect makeup was smudged, and her designer outfit was wrinkled, as if she'd thrown it on in a hurry. When she saw me sitting at the table with Marcus, her face contorted with an emotion I'd never seen before, pure, unadulterated rage. "Elena Martinez," she said as she burst into our private viewing room, ignoring Patricia's protests about the space being reserved. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" David was right behind her, but his focus was entirely on Marcus. "Mr. Romano, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm David Chen, Victoria's husband. I believe we need to discuss this situation privately." Marcus stood up, still holding my hand, and I was struck by how commanding his presence was. At 6'3", he towered over David, and there was something in his expression that made David take a step backward. "I don't believe we have anything to discuss, Mr. Chen. My fiancé and I are simply shopping for wedding rings." "Your fiancé?" Victoria's voice was shrill, drawing stares from other customers in the store. "Elena, you've lost your mind. Yesterday you were my sister, a social worker living in Logan Square, and today you're supposedly engaged to Marcus Romano? This is insane." Patricia looked extremely uncomfortable as the tension in the room escalated. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation elsewhere." "No," I said, standing up and facing my sister directly. "Let's talk about this right here, right now. Let's talk about all the lies, Victoria. Starting with the fact that you've known I wasn't Roberto's biological daughter for 12 years and never said a word." Victoria's face went white. David stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "Ladies, I think we're all getting a bit emotional here. Why don't we step outside and discuss this rationally?" Marcus moved protectively closer to me. "The lady said she wants to talk here. I suggest you listen." "This is ridiculous," Victoria snapped. "Elena, you can't seriously believe you're Alessandro Romano's daughter just because you read some documents. DNA tests can be faked, documents can be forged. Someone is obviously trying to scam you." "Someone is definitely trying to scam someone," I agreed, looking directly at David. "But it's not who you think." David's face was getting redder by the minute. "Elena, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you're in way over your head. The Romano family is not what they seem. You're being used." "The only person being used here is me," I said, my voice growing stronger. "Used by you, David. For months, you've been planning to blackmail Alessandro Romano using me as leverage. You seduced his wife as part of your scheme, and you've been lying to my sister about everything." Victoria looked back and forth between David and me, confusion replacing anger on her face. "What is she talking about, David?" David's mask was finally slipping. Victoria, don't listen to her. She's obviously been brainwashed by these people. They're trying to turn our family against each other. That's when Marcus spoke up, his voice calm but deadly serious. Mr. Chen, would you like to explain to your wife why you've been meeting with Sophia Romano at the Peninsula Hotel every Tuesday for the past 3 months? The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria turned to stare at her husband, and I watched as the pieces finally clicked into place for her. David? Her voice was barely a whisper. Please tell me that's not true. David looked like a cornered animal. Victoria, I can explain. Explain what? Victoria's voice was getting louder again. Explain why you've been cheating on me? Explain why my sister apparently knows more about my husband's activities than I do. Explain why you're here confronting her about being engaged to someone else when you should be home explaining why you've been having an affair. Other customers were definitely staring now, and store security was moving in our direction. But Victoria wasn't done. You know what, David? I've suspected for months that something was wrong with our marriage. I've been making excuses for your behavior, telling myself I was being paranoid. But Elena was right, you have been lying to me about everything. David made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Victoria, if you would just calm down and listen. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. Victoria spun around to face me, and I could see years of frustration and pain boiling over. And you? You manipulative little bitch. You've been planning this whole thing, haven't you? Somehow you found out about David's affair and decided to use it to destroy my marriage. Victoria, that's not. You've always been jealous of my life, Elena. Always resentful that I got the better opportunities, the better marriage, the better everything. So you decided to seduce some rich man and pretend to be his long-lost daughter just to upstage me. The accusation was so unfair, so completely wrong, that I felt something snap inside me. Jealous? Victoria, you want to talk about jealousy? You've spent our entire lives making sure I knew I was second best, second choice, second everything. You knew I wasn't Roberto's daughter and you said nothing because you liked being the only real child. That's not true. It is true. You liked watching me struggle through college while you got everything handed to you. You liked being the golden child while I was the afterthought. And now that the truth is finally coming out, you can't stand that I might actually be worth something. Victoria's hand flew up and slapped me across the face with a crack that echoed through the jewelry store. The entire store went silent, and I could feel every eye in the place staring at us. But before I could react, Marcus stepped between us, his voice low and dangerous. Touch my wife again and see what happens. The word wife hung in the air like a bomb. Victoria stared at Marcus in shock, then looked down at the massive diamond ring on my finger, then back at my face where her handprint was probably still visible. Wife, she whispered. That's when Alessandro Romano walked into Tiffany Co. The moment Alessandro Romano entered the store, the entire atmosphere shifted. Conversation stopped, heads turned, and even the background music seemed to quiet down. When you're worth billions of dollars and own half of downtown Chicago, your presence commands attention. Alessandro was dressed impeccably in a charcoal gray suit, but his expression was thunderous as he took in the scene, his daughter with a red handprint on her face, his nephew standing protectively beside her, and David Chen looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Is there a problem here? Alessandro's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it that made everyone in earshot straighten up. Store security had arrived, along with what appeared to be the store manager, but they hung back respectfully when they recognized Alessandro. The Romano family had probably spent more money in this store than most people made in a lifetime. Victoria was staring at Alessandro with dawning realization. You're really her father, she said, almost to herself. This isn't some elaborate scam. You're actually Elena's biological father. Yes, I am, Alessandro said simply. And you just assaulted my daughter in front of a store full of witnesses. David finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. Mr. Romano, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a family matter that got out of hand. The only misunderstanding here, Mr. Chen, is your belief that you could blackmail me using my own daughter." Alessandro pulled out his phone and showed David the screen. "I have copies of every document you've compiled on Elena, including your unsent blackmail letter. I also have photographs of you entering the Peninsula Hotel with my wife every Tuesday for the past 3 months." David's face went ashen. "Sir, I can explain." "You can explain it to my lawyers. And to the SEC, since they'll be very interested in how you've been using insider information gathered through your affair with my wife to manipulate your hedge fund's investments." The implications hit David like a physical blow. Not only was his blackmail scheme exposed, but Alessandro was suggesting he'd committed securities fraud. His career was over, his marriage was destroyed, and he was potentially facing criminal charges. Victoria looked back and forth between her husband and Alessandro, trying to process everything. "David, is this true? Have you really been planning to blackmail him?" "Victoria, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been cheating on me as part of some scheme to extort money from my sister's biological father? That you've been using me, using our marriage, using everything as cover for your criminal activities?" Marcus squeezed my hand, and I realized I was shaking. The confrontation I'd been dreading had turned into something much bigger than I'd anticipated. This wasn't just about family secrets anymore, this was about justice. "There's something else you should know, Victoria," Alessandro said, his voice gentler now. "Your husband's hedge fund is on the verge of bankruptcy. He's been covering massive losses for months, borrowing against your personal assets to stay afloat. The penthouse you're living in? It's mortgaged to the hilt. Your investment accounts? He's been draining them to cover his bad trades." Victoria's legs seemed to give out, and she sank into one of the chairs at our viewing table. "How much?" she whispered. "According to my financial investigators, approximately $8 million in debt, all secured against assets that are in your name." The number hit Victoria like a sledgehammer. Her perfect life, her financial security, her future. All of it had been systematically destroyed by the man she'd trusted with everything. David made one last desperate play. "Victoria, don't listen to him. He's trying to turn you against me because he knows I can expose his family's connection to Elena. This is all about protecting his reputation." But Victoria was done listening to David's lies. She stood up slowly, her face eerily calm. "David, I want you to leave. Now." "Victoria, please." "I said leave. Take your affairs, take your schemes, take your debt, and get out of my sight. When I get home, I expect you to be gone." David looked around the room desperately, as if searching for someone who might support him. Finding none, he turned back to Alessandro with what looked like resignation mixed with rage. "This isn't over, Romano. You can't just destroy people's lives because you have money and power." Alessandro's smile was cold. "I'm not destroying your life, Mr. Chen. You did that all by yourself when you decided to use my daughter as a pawn in your schemes. I'm simply making sure you face the consequences of your choices." As David stormed out of Tiffany Company, Victoria turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "Elena, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for slapping you, I'm sorry for all the things I said, and I'm sorry for keeping the truth from you for so many years." I wanted to stay angry at her. Part of me felt like she deserved to suffer for all the years she'd made me feel like I didn't belong. But looking at her now, her marriage destroyed, her financial security gone, her perfect life crumbling around her, I couldn't maintain the rage. "Victoria, I never wanted any of this to happen to you." "I know," she whispered. "I know you didn't. I was just so scared that if the truth came out, everything would change. I was afraid Dad would love you more than me if he knew you were special, that you had this whole other family who could give you everything we couldn't." Alessandro stepped forward, his expression compassionate. "Victoria, Elena having another family doesn't make her more special than you. Roberto and Carmen raised an incredible daughter in you too. This isn't about replacing one family with another, It's about Elena finally knowing the complete truth about where she comes from. Patricia, who had been standing frozen in shock throughout this entire confrontation, finally found her voice. Perhaps we should move this conversation to a more private location? Marcus laughed, breaking some of the tension. I think we've given everyone enough drama for one afternoon. Elena, should we actually look at some wedding rings, or was this all just an elaborate performance? I looked up at him, this man who had agreed to pretend to be my fiancé to help expose David's scheme, and realized that somewhere during this insane afternoon, the line between performance and reality had started to blur. I think, I said carefully, we should probably have dinner first and discuss whether this engagement is real or not. Alessandro grinned, looking more relaxed than he had all day. In that case, why don't we all go back to my house? I think Elena and Victoria have a lot to catch up on, and I'd like to hear more about how my nephew managed to fall for my daughter in the span of 24 hours. As we left Tiffany and Company, with Victoria walking beside me and Marcus holding my hand, I couldn't help but think about how dramatically my life had changed in just 2 days. I'd started as Elena Martinez, struggling social worker, and I was ending as Elena Romano, billionaire heiress with a potential fiancé and a family that was finally ready to tell the truth. But David Chen's story wasn't over yet. As we would soon discover, desperate men with nothing left to lose can be very dangerous indeed. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same Tiffany and Company where my sister had slapped me, but this time the circumstances were completely different. Marcus was beside me, and we were genuinely shopping for wedding rings, not as part of an elaborate scheme, but because our fake engagement had somehow turned into the real thing. I still can't believe this all started with you pretending to be my fiancé, I said, admiring the simple but elegant band he'd just slipped onto my finger. Best acting job of my life, Marcus replied with a smile that had become my favorite sight in the world. Though I should probably admit that I stopped acting about 5 minutes after I met you. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of revelations, legal proceedings, and new beginnings. David Chen's downfall had been swift and complete. The SEC investigation revealed that he'd been using information gathered through his affair with Sophia Romano to make illegal trades, and the FBI found evidence of his planned blackmail scheme in emails he thought he'd deleted. He was currently serving a 3-year sentence in federal prison for securities fraud and attempted extortion. Victoria had filed for divorce immediately after the Tiffany's confrontation, and with Alessandro's help, she'd managed to protect most of her assets from David's creditors. It turned out that having a billionaire for a brother-in-law came with certain advantages, including access to the best financial lawyers in Chicago. I still feel guilty about how everything happened, I confided to Marcus as we left the jewelry store. Victoria lost everything because of me. Victoria lost everything because of David, Marcus corrected gently. You just helped expose the truth. And she's rebuilding her life better than ever. That was true. Victoria had surprised everyone by using the insurance money from David's seized assets to start her own consulting firm, helping other women who'd been financially betrayed by their spouses navigate divorce and asset protection. She was making less money than before, but she was happier than I'd ever seen her. Our relationship had changed dramatically too. The slap at Tiffany's had somehow cleared the air between us, forcing us to confront years of resentment and miscommunication. We'd spent hours talking through our childhood, with Victoria finally explaining how scared she'd been that I would replace her in our parents' affections if they knew the truth about my parentage. I was so jealous of you, she'd admitted during one of our weekly coffee dates. You were always so independent, so strong, so sure of yourself. I was terrified that if Mom and Dad knew you were special, that you had this whole other identity, they'd realize you were the better daughter. Roberto and Carmen had taken the revelation about my parentage better than anyone expected. Carmen broke down crying when the truth came out, apologizing for the lie she'd carried for 28 years. But Roberto just hugged me and said, "You're my daughter in every way that matters." DNA doesn't change 28 years of love. They'd both embraced Alessandro as part of our extended family, with Roberto joking that having a billionaire as Elena's biological father was the best family secret ever. Carmen and Sophia Romano had even become unlikely friends, bonding over their shared experience of being married to complicated men. Alessandro had insisted on compensating me for the years of financial struggle I'd endured while he unknowingly lived in luxury. He'd set up a trust fund that made me independently wealthy, paid off all my student loans, and offered me a position overseeing the Romano Foundation's charitable giving. For the first time in my life, I could focus on helping families in crisis without worrying about my own financial security. But the best part of this whole experience had been Marcus. What started as a fake engagement to expose David's scheme had evolved into something real and beautiful. Marcus was everything I'd never thought I deserved: kind, intelligent, funny, and completely supportive of my work with struggling families. "There's something I need to tell you," I said as we walked through Grant Park toward Alessandro's house, where we were meeting Victoria and my parents for Sunday dinner. "Should I be worried?" Marcus asked with a grin. "I'm pregnant." Marcus stopped walking and stared at me, his face cycling through surprise, joy, and wonder. "Really?" "Really. I found out yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Marcus." He swept me into his arms and spun me around, laughing with pure happiness. "A baby?" Alessandro is going to lose his mind with excitement. He's been dropping hints about grandchildren since our second date. As we continued toward the house, I thought about how much my life had changed since that day at Tiffany's. I'd gone from being the family afterthought to the center of a loving, complicated, wonderful extended family. I had a career I was passionate about, financial security I'd never dreamed of, and a man who loved me exactly as I was. The confrontation that had started with David's betrayal and Victoria's slap had ultimately led to the most important discovery of my life. Not just that Alessandro Romano was my biological father, but that I was worthy of love, respect, and happiness. The girl who'd spent 28 years feeling like she didn't quite belong had finally found her place in the world. So here's what I learned from this whole crazy experience: sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead to the most beautiful new beginnings. David thought he could use me as a pawn in his game, but instead, his scheme brought me face to face with the family I never knew I had and the love I never thought I deserved. Family karma is real, and justice does get served, sometimes in ways you never expected. David got exactly what he deserved, Victoria found her strength, and I discovered that being the afterthought daughter was actually the best thing that ever happened to me because it made me strong enough to handle the truth when it finally came out. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered something about your family that completely changed how you saw yourself? Or maybe you've witnessed karma come back to bite someone who deserved it? Share your stories in the comments below because I love hearing about how life has a way of working itself out. If this story taught you anything about the power of truth and family loyalty, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama that proves fiction has nothing on reality. And definitely share this with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best discoveries. Thank you so much for following along on this wild journey with me. I hope my story reminds you that no matter how complicated your family situation might be, the truth really does set you free, even when it comes with a slap across the face in the middle of Tiffany and Company. Until next time, remember that every ending is really just a new beginning in disguise. Much love to all of you. 2 hearts.